All right, welcome back. It's great to have you all with us today. Today, I'm excited to have with me Bill Lewis, who is a part of our Lori Stohs consulting team. And also, Bill is a good friend, used to be a client of mine for a number of years in our previous lives. And we get the chance and the opportunity to work together and be friends and talk together and connect. And today, I just wanted to bring him to all of you to really talk about something that's near and dear to all of our hearts through life, which is called transitions. And we do a newsletter every few months. And so we were talking about our newsletter, and Bill said, hey, how about transitions? There's lots of people going through transitions right now, and life is full of transitions. When we think about transitions, I think sometimes we think, oh, they're negative or positive. Sometimes they're voluntary, sometimes they're involuntary. But I really talk about life as a transition because there's stages and phases of our life that we all have the opportunity to go through. And it's really how we respond to those types of things, and really decide whether they're voluntary or involuntary, how best to handle those. So Bill, why don't you tell me a little bit about your philosophy around transitions and some of your thoughts around that?
Sure. I think, Lori, thanks for the time here because this is one that I get really pepped up about because I think there's some great learnings here for us, not only as individuals, but there's some really strong messages here for those of us who lead others. And we all lead others. Let's face that fact right now. Whether they report to you or not, you have influence. You have the capability to be with people as they go through life. And change has, I guess maybe overly simplified. There are some that are huge. Oftentimes you hear the phrase large scale change. And then there's others that are just, okay, where are we going to go for dinner tonight? And making those life decisions throughout our days. So it is a topic I have a lot of energy around, but also I have more than just a casual notion about what do we do with change.
Mm-hmm.
Someone once said it's not the changes we go through that causes the challenge. It's the transitions, what we're going to talk about here, that become those challenging stages or moments.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to give full credit here. A lot of what I'm going to talk about comes from some work that William Bridges did many years ago. And his organization continues to be one of those, William Bridges and Associates, that are at the forefront of not only change leadership, but really the science and the psychology. Think about those combined. There's a science and a psychology to what we visit when we go through change. To get to the heart of the matter, he talks about 3 stages of transition. The first stage, think about just simply as endings. What is not going to happen anymore? What's over and will be no more and will be left behind? And frankly, maybe we need to find a way to let go of. Boy, this is a hard one because we've all heard the phrase comfort zone, and how do we want to go back to that? Lori, I think about where we are today with all the ambiguity, all of the things we just don't know what's next, and we can't even run to it. And we realize that some things will not be the same as they used to be. You can take a look at your day. Everybody listening into this, you can look at your own days and realize you're going through literally some dramatic change, much of which you are not going to be able to go back to. Whether it be those going back to school now, or whether they be students, or whether they be professionals. Heck, Lori, there are some organizations that are talking about already announcing we will not be back to a physical, altogether in a building workspace for maybe a year from now. So there is that letting go piece of what will be no more and what will be left behind. That's his first transition around endings.
Yeah, I kind of call those sometimes our goodbyes, you know, even
Oh,
though,
that's good.
right,
Yeah,
you know,
that,
that there is a goodbye, and whether that's a permanent goodbye or, you know, see you later goodbye. There
yeah,
is kind of there's a little bit of because I think when there's sometimes the goodbye moment, there's an emotion of sadness, right? Because some
hmm,
of these transitions, of course, with what we call them, there's also emotions attached to each of these phases, right? So I think
yeah.
we have to acknowledge what that might mean to us.
Yeah, there are emotions attached to it. And one of the, I guess one of the messages I would bring to that is don't be alone in those emotions. You know, it's different
Mhm,
for all of us. Some of us really reach out
mhm,
quite naturally and effortlessly to others when things are happening. Others of us we go through it a little bit more on our own. But
mhm,
don't be alone in those because they can be hard and they can be abrupt. Um,
mhm.
yeah, good point about the emotions. Thanks for bringing that up.
Sure.
The second thing he gets into is I call this that messy stage, which
Mhm,
is neutrality. The ambiguity is real, and this is really hard on those. Think about those in strength finders that really enjoy that execution or even the strategic feature of planning for and knowing what is and going after it and moving through the getting stuff done. This is a messy stage because you don't know what next looks like. You don't know what it can be, just you feel stuck at times in that
mhm,
neutrality. Susan Beaumont, one of my favorite authors, has a book on a topic called liminality, which is leading
mm,
in ambiguity, leading when we don't know really what's next. We know the old is gone. We talked about that with the letting
mhm,
go, but we don't know what the new looks like. And I mean, to be real business speak about it, it's not fully operational.
mhm,
Um, and here, though, I'm gonna stretch people's thinking just for a moment, Lori. Here, though, is where those creative juices can really start to happen if we're open to it. Now, back to the leaders piece. Here's a spot where I see a pitfall happen for leaders where they think they have to have all the answers. I mean, they certainly benefit from having direction. They certainly benefit from building that hope about what's next. But this is a really wonderful spot to rally people into I guess, a shared purpose of where are we going to go next? We're letting go of what's
mhm.
been. We don't quite know what's next. And that neutrality stage is the next one that Bridges talks about as being an important one to move through. The last point I'll make about neutrality, you can kind of wash back and forth in that stage. I
Mm.
can't think of a better visual, a sink trap. Under your sink, there's that U-shaped
Yep.
part to the piping. Boy, if you pull that off and look inside that, it can be more than yucky. More than yucky. It's
Mhm.
because this is a stage in change where it is messy, it is yucky. How do you like those two technical terms there? But we do go back and forth in that, don't we? We
Mhm.
just kind of move back and forth in that second stage of neutrality.
You know, I want to speak it. Thank you, Bill, for that, because I do kind of call that messy middles also, you
Yeah.
know, when you're talking about neutrality and it's like sitting there. And there's some strengths of people who struggle at that phase. I think about some people when we've been coaching, right? When they're in
Hmm.
that career transition or in that challenge phase of I got to get out of what I've been in, but I don't know where I'm going. And so this middle phase is where clarity needs to be created. Okay. And I always say first, there's two things to go to. One is our strengths and two is our values, right? Because when we're not in alignment with those two, we're going to stay in that that you, right? We're going to stay back and forth and back and forth. And that's where sometimes we need to first go back and say, what are my values and what's important to me as I think about my next phase? And also, what are my strengths and how can I utilize my strengths to really decide what that next phase is, or determine the best partners that I may have for that. So
Mm-hmm.
let's speak about some individuals. Someone came to mind when you were talking, and lovely man and very successful. But that in middle stage, he had a lot of thinking talents, right? A lot of strategic thinking. So sat, not as much execution. So process, lots of information, you know, what I could do this and this, and really stayed stuck. So I was a good partner. And when he was choosing his coaches, we talked about that because I said, I really feel like I can help you sort to the best alternative based off some of what you need. And he needed a sorting partner. He needed somebody to really help him sort through what that might be for him and encourage him, right, to get where he needs to get. So I think we have to stop and pause and say, who am I and what do I need? Because guess what? Whether have done this when you were 25, 35, 55, 60, you're going to be in the same space. You're going to have more experience as we gain more wisdom with our colored hair and less hair. All right.
Right.
But the whole point of it is sometimes we still need a partner, and we shouldn't
Yeah.
be ashamed about that. We should go, you know what? I've been here before. Here's what I need to get over that hump and get out of that messy middle. So I just want to
Yeah.
encourage people to really look at who they are and be okay with needing help and asking for help and what they need.
Yeah. You did a great job of bringing the word clarity in here. It's so important, especially in that neutral phase, because I'd ask people to think about the fact of being sure you know what is changing and what is not changing.
Mm,
It may sound cute, but I think sometimes we need to have more real issues than imaginary ones. Our minds can really run to some interesting places around the sky is falling and what have you. I'm not trying to minimize when tough
mhm,
change happens, but you're right. It's great to have that clarity, not only about self and how you go through
mhm,
it, but what is and what is not changing. You also talk about something that causes us to begin to move to his third stage, which is he calls it beginnings. But I think the notion between neutral and beginnings is what help do you need?
mm,
Lori, I think help is interesting. I don't know if it's chronologically correct, but the older we get, it seems like the less likely we are to ask for help, but the more likely we are to provide it. We tend to think we have to know it all or do it all or muscle through it somehow.
mhm,
When just think about when you're asked to help someone, we typically drop anything we're doing and we jump to the chance to aid others. So just think about that whole notion of who could you reach out to
mhm.
and benefit from, and how good does that feel when you're on the other end of that and able to help somebody through this. But he talks about beginnings, and it always has reminded me of the Wizard of Oz, and there's the Emerald City, and now it's all happy and gay again. um, it maybe necessarily isn't, but we can think about new beginnings as, what are those new understandings we have?
Mm,
Maybe some tactical things are starting to fall in place, maybe not, but what are the new values? You just used that word.
mhm,
It's not maybe a new value as much as leaning into and
mhm,
anchoring into the values we find important. What are the identities that are out there now? Maybe there's some new people involved. Maybe there's some new ways involved, some new methods, new processes. And now, what does our understanding of now look like?
mm.
So, yeah, his three transitions: the endings, the letting go, the neutral, that ambiguity, and then finally the beginnings, the understandings of what's next, both tactically and even strategically. Those are the things he talks about in his
Mm.
transitions model.
Yeah, when you were talking through that, I was thinking about the new beginnings, and depending on what you're going through in terms of transition, sometimes it again may be voluntary, involuntary. It
Yeah,
might be personal. It might be an addiction. It might be a
sure.
job. It might be a relationship. But I think one thing we have to think about in that new beginnings is going back to asking for help. But sometimes we have to think about our tribe. As we go through those phases, sometimes we may have to have a new tribe to support us. I always say your vibe attracts your tribe, and our vibe may shift as we go through a new beginning. And I think sometimes people are trying to squeeze. We're trying to squeeze this new thing into this
Yeah,
traditional. It's not good or bad, but I think we have to stop and pause and say they may or may not support this new beginning. They may or may not hold the energy and the space that I need them to hold for this new beginning. And I think we all have different ways of dealing with that. And I think sometimes we have that tug, right? We have that tug of those relationships, especially if they're important, but we know this truth is dying inside to come out and
yeah,
expand, right? And so this internal truth when we go through this neutrality to new beginnings is a great thing. But then sometimes there's this pullback. And I want people to really, it's like a rubber band, right? It's like, what's that pull back? I want you all to stop and think about what is that, what's pulling you back sometimes. Sometimes it's just our own courage and our fear, right? Going back to emotions. What is it? Are we letting somebody down? Are we afraid that they're not going to like us or we're not going to be approved if we go do X, Y, and Z? And that's where I find that tug of that rubber band is really hard for people to go into. I want to launch. I want to launch in this new beginning, and here's where I'm at, and here's why I'm at it, and I need your support. And if I can't have your support, then that's a decision I have to make.
I know you and I
Any
have
comments?
both. I know you and I have both used rubber bands as a great illustrations of things. One that we're both familiar with is too, when you take that rubber band and you start to stretch it, there can
Hmm.
be some excitement around that. Some energy is truly created. But if you aren't careful and that stretch lasts too long or it's out too
Mm.
far, we both know what happens
Yep.
to that rubber band. And
Yep.
so, one of the themes I think that you and I both have tried to endorse to others, I don't know how well I practice this one, but I'll put it out there as a really important learning. Um, Change, and in this case, transitions, it's
Hmm.
not at the pace of the person leading it, it's at the pace of the person going through it. And just
Mm.
think about the times when we have maybe become frustrated with others that they aren't getting it as soon as somebody, why is this taking so
Mm.
long? What don't you
Hmm.
get? Well, you may have had months to think about it. They've had moments to think
Yeah.
about it. And so I like your illustration with the rubber band. And I think about every person in a change situation where transitions are occurring is their very own rubber band. And how
Hmm.
much tension, how much stretch, how much positive is happening here, but also what are the things we just need to give people some grace around
Hmm.
and some time around to be able to move through at their pace and not the pace we think is right.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think that's, and all of us have, I'm probably more of a launcher, right? It's like when I make my mind up, I'm off and running. Just
Oh,
like
that's shocking, Lori, having worked with
yeah,
you.
just like I got on a plane and, flew from Portland
Lori,
here to the
yeah,
Midwest.
exactly,
Because
exactly.
I'm okay to do that, and I'm okay to make change. And so everybody's a little different on that, right? So I think some of us have to know what our comfort is.
Yeah,
And that leads me to ask you and to make a couple comments around the support of others.
yeah,
Because sometimes we give people support how we would like to receive support, right?
yeah,
So even when we're thinking about managing and leading our family, managing and leading our direct reports, whatever it might be, our teams, I want to think about that whole piece of what do they need?
yeah.
Because sometimes people need the coddling and the loving and going, it's good, and sometimes people need the cheering you on, hey, you got this, and sometimes people need a slap on the face because it's like, change. You need to throw the cold water in their face and change the state.
All three.
um, right, all three. So I think that's one thing we have to think about too, is what does that person need, and making sure we're
Yeah.
asking them that, not assuming that they need what we need. Any
Well, you
comments
walked
around that?
into you walked into yeah, thank you. We've all heard the golden rule, which is treat others the way we would like to be treated. I think what we strive for here is the platinum.
Hmm.
Treat others the way they would like to be treated. In the world of coactive and presence-based coaching, you don't meet people where you are or where you believe they are. You meet them clearly where they
Hmm.
are. And so I think that, again, easy to say, hard to do. But if you have a heart to really be in tune with and to set a tone of being in support for others, you're right. All three of those. Hey, what do you need right now?
Hmm.
Some, some real tenderness. What do you need right now by the way of encouragement? And then finally, what do you need right now of, with all, I love your cold water in the face. Sometimes we just need that.
Yeah.
And all three of those are best brought by us being in tune with what the other person
Hmm.
needs in that moment, not what we think, what they know.
Well, and sometimes it's a little bit of both, right?
Sure.
Encouraging, and then when you ask people, it's like, well, I need affirmation, but then I do need a slap
Yeah.
on the face, right?
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
need somebody to shake me once in a while and get me moving.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really good. I think going back to the last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was that emotion piece
Okay.
that comes with this, because I do think we kind of touched on it at the beginning. I think there are at the end of the day, when people do snap back, or when people go back to this, the uncertainty is the emotions of fear, of maybe shame, right? Of sadness, going back to goodbyes, going back to, do you have different advice for people to think about as they go through those emotions, how to really work? You mentioned the word creativity before. How do you really work through
Sure.
those?
Well, this is a word that's either going to frighten people or thrill people. Journal is is
I get
one.
it.
Yeah, that talk about a polarity. But journaling is a really good tool,
Hmm.
Lori, because it just allows people a chance to transfer what's in your mind through your hand onto a pen and into paper. And it
Hmm.
gives you a chance to capture, is the word I think about in journaling, the thoughts in the moment. Um, by the way, journals are not for a publication to others. They can be if you wish to share, but they're for you to
Hmm.
capture where you are in this. And I think some of the most important journaling, if you just substitute the word journaling and put capturing, what's on my
Hmm.
mind, what's on my heart, what's in my being in that moment, is one good way for some self work around transitions.
Hmm.
The other feature to it is I'm going to emphasize it again, don't go it alone. You don't need to be alone during transition. And isn't it true, Lori, that now that's so much more interesting with physical distancing and the things we were
Hmm.
used to doing, where we could be in community with others, and now the communities are so different and so much more challenging. But it doesn't mean we have to let go of that theory. We don't have to go through things alone. So maybe there's some self talk there, some
Hmm.
self edification on what is and what is not based upon your own journaling or capturing. And then second of all, back to that theme about don't go it alone. You've got people that care about you, and just think about that help piece again. We're reluctant to ask for it, but we're eager to provide it.
Mm, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I think that we all know we're going to have a life full of transition,
Yeah.
a life full of life quakes, as I call them, all the things that rattle us. But I think sometimes um, we just need to expect them, right? Because I think it's like, oh, this perfect life. Well, this perfect life is the life on Facebook that people think they see versus the real life that's really behind
Yeah.
social media, which is really when you really think about depth of connection and depth of relationships and the soul, right? The soul opening up. Those are the times, right? Those are the time in this crazy world when everything that we're dealing with, right now, today, Bill and I are taping this on 9/11, and I go back to 19 years ago and what happened, and that moment of people's lives changing. And now we fast forward in 2020 on 9/11, and the western part of the U.S. is burning up and with fires in California and Oregon, and people's lives and are changing, and we have COVID, and so you just look and go. I was in New York on 9/11. I was just in Portland yesterday, thinking about who would have thought about those times and how we respond to life that happens, life earthquake, fires, illness, death, whatever it might be, and they're going to be part of life. And I think part of it is our own understanding of self and our own resilience to working through transitions like you've guided us today.
Yeah.
Thank you
Well
for
said.
that.
Well
That's
said.
beautiful.
I just would, I would boost what you're talking about there. That you, in your New York exam, you were there. I know you were, and you just
Yeah.
mentioned it here. And to look back on what you experienced and what you went through, that was numbing. That
Mm.
was large scale, as large scale can be. And also just your decision to leave Portland for a while, to get some breathing room for a while. It's all okay. And, others may not have made your choice, Lori, but that
Hmm.
doesn't matter. You made your
Right.
choice for you. That's what matters. That's what's important.
Well, thank you. And it's interesting because, it's a little emotional thinking about 9/11 and
I
thinking
bet.
about just yesterday. And I probably consciously didn't recognize, I didn't have a choice on 9/11 not to be able to fly home. I had to stay there because of there's no choices, right? I mean, no cars, no flights, no trains, no planes, no automobiles, right? You couldn't get out. And there was a feeling of that. And finally, ended up 5 days later, driving across, with a couple people I met from another company and made it home. Where, here I had a choice to get on a plane before it got to a point where I couldn't, or, whatever. So I think that was another piece of that. Is it took me a long time to be back with family before, where here I got the choice and I
Yeah.
did it. So I could be with family and be close to, my loved ones and those I want to be with and spend time with. So,
Well, and not to get all spiritual on it, but you just defined the serenity prayer.
mm-hmm,
Where are the times when we can make the choice and we know that? Where are the
mm-hmm,
times when, boy, we can't describe and make the choice? And how do we know that difference?
mm-hmm. Yeah. Goes back to that voluntary and
Doesn't
involuntary,
it?
right? Is what we
It
started
does.
out with. So,
Yeah.
well, this is life, right? And I
It
am just
is.
so grateful for our time together. And we've had a lot of life together. I think we're
Hmm.
both still 40, right? Something like that.
Something like that.
we've had a few.
And we'll have more. And we'll
Well,
have more.
we'll have many, many
Yeah.
more. And so, I just want to thank you, Bill, for the time today and sharing with us, your great experience and wisdom, and helping us think through transitions and life quakes, as I call them, and really think about how we can continue growing through those. Because I think the biggest thing is on the other side, there's such amazing
Oh,
growth, right? There's
true.
just sometimes when you're going through that messy middle and that neutral stage, it's like, ugh. But then when you get on the other side, it's just
Mm,
this growth and it feels so amazing and so beautiful. And
yeah.
so we need to look at these as wonderful gifts that are entering into our lives, even though they're hard sometimes. So thanks for being with me through these gifts, Bill. And I'm so grateful for that.
Back at you.
And yeah, we've had a lot of
Thanks,
good
Lori.
things together. You're welcome. And for all of those, again, we will be having our newsletter coming out, which features an article from Bill about transitions and about kind of just through life change. And of course, it's fall. So of course, that allows us to be thinking about letting go. We kind of forgetting about our climate change right now is causing us to not know what seasons it is because there's many other distractions. But I just wish you all to be present, to enjoy your moment, to think about who you are and really think about those transitions and how you can really work through them and grow and be better on the other side. So thanks again, Bill. Have a wonderful weekend. And thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you. Please rate or review or share. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much for joining us today. And remember to get your mind on.